going on, everybody? You are live with Osiris. Welcome to the Author's Lounge. The world is filled with storytellers, and I, along with my guests, are here today in the Author's Lounge to help educate and inspire the young generation of writers and creators. Now, my guests are professionals in publishing, writers from a wide range of formats, and successful entertainers. They will provide beneficial advice on what to do and what not to do on your path to success. So, without further ado, I'll present to you our next guest. Let's go. Thank you all again so much for just taking a brief moment out of your day to tune in to today's episode. I am just honored and beyond grateful to be able to continue to work on this show and bring on the amount of guests that I've been able to bring on. Today, I have a wonderful guest, and this guest, I was able to, we actually connected through a mutual friend or agent that she has, but a friend to me, Andy Ross, who came onto this show a couple of months ago. And so our guest, she is a poet, she is an author, she has written short essays, she has written anthologies. There's an extensive resume that she has with her books. There is one book that I want to talk about, in addition to a book that's going to be launching later this year. But we'll hop into that once we do it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the wonderful Gwen Strauss. How you doing today, ma'am?
I'm great, and thank you so much for inviting me. I love being with you and sharing this time.
Of course, and thank you for just taking that time as well to come on. I'm gonna enjoy this. I knew when I spoke to Andy, and he had mentioned you during the recording, that we had to talk. So he and I spoke once the recording was over. He had so much great things to say about you, and I was just asking him, "Can you please put in a good word for me or something?" Because I would love to talk to her.
Oh, that's great. That's really sweet. I'm happy. I love Andy.
Yes, for sure. So, many people who watch this show, their age ranges from 12 all the way up to 45. At least that's what the statistics say. There are people like older than that as well, but that's kind of like the general audience ages that watch the show. But one of my questions I wanted to ask you while speaking about Andy Ross is the process of getting an agent. Some people go the self-published route because they don't want to go that route, or there may be other extenuating circumstances as to why people go self-published. But for you, you are traditionally published. So how did you manage to link up with Andy? Or better yet, the better question should be is, what was the process for you in getting an agent?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think really getting an agent is almost harder than getting published these days. So I really appreciate that question because it was a tricky thing for me. I have a cough. Um, so I had, as I said, I had several agents. I've gone through them, and I'm not a difficult writer. I don't think it's not me. It's just that agents are difficult, really.
Mhm.
My experience with different agents, and I won't name any names, but I had agents that met me or heard me or read something of mine, a little short story, and like, oh, you're the best, you're the best. They like tell you like they promise you the earth and the moon, and then they kind of fall away. Like that happened to me a lot when I was younger and really disappointing. And even, to the point where I had like this really big time agent and he told me, don't worry, I get everything published. And then when he couldn't sell one of my books, he just almost never responded to me again.
Mm,
So it took a while for me to see like what I really wanted was not somebody famous or New York, but I wanted somebody who would respond to me and
hmm
who I could have a relationship with, who I could enjoy and work with. Because nowadays agents really do a lot of the editing. They kind of help you they're sort of the first thing. It used to be you would get an editor. Now it's really an agent. And so I looked in books that are people I love. I read the books that people that I love, and looked in the back where they in the acknowledgments, and I would see who was their agent, and I
hmm
would write to that agent. And when I wrote to Andy, he wrote back. That was right away. He wrote back and said, send me. I think he said send me 10 pages. I sent 10 pages. He wrote right back and said, "Okay, send me 50 more." And then he wrote right back and said, "Let's get on a call together." And
hmm
our first phone call was like an hour long, and laughing and talking. And I realized, oh, this is someone I can work with. this will be fun. I mean, I just want to enjoy myself too, you know.
Hmm.
And Andy really helped me get my first book published with him because I had someone who was sort of interested in turning it into a film, and he said, "You don't even have a publishing contract. You have to make a book proposal." And I said, I've never written a book proposal. He said, "That's good because I have written a book about how to write a book proposal." So I got his book and I followed it to a T, and it was a great book proposal. And I've used that again, and I've shown it to other people, had them buy his book, and they all said it's a great way to, it's a really good guide. If you just follow it, you have a great book proposal.
Oh, I like that idea. What's the name of that book, if you don't mind?
It's even something like how to Agent's Guide to How to Write a Book Proposal. I think it's really, yeah, I think it's an agent's guide to writing a book proposal. And
Okay,
Ross. Yeah, just look it up. I think it's available on Amazon, or maybe it's available as an ebook download. I
that's
downloaded the ebook.
that's a golden nugget right there for for my listeners and
Yeah,
for her viewers as well. Take note of that.
really is. And I just followed it exactly. It really outlines it, and then you have, and I had a friend who had been working on a book proposal for like 6 months, and I did mine in maybe a month, and it was
Mhm.
really solid. So you don't want to spend all your time writing the proposal and not writing the book.
Oh no, no, that's for sure, and that's the I would say the fortunate piece about going in the route that you're going on is that you really don't have to focus on much else outside of really honing in on your writing. And as I mentioned earlier about the route that you take in going traditionally the trap published route, and in the self publishing world they have to do everything else,
That's a lot.
and
It's a lot of work.
yeah, no, for sure, for sure. You had mentioned something as well regarding with Andy, but I think this is applicable in general as relationships, right? Being able to build a relationship of someone that you can just trust and get along with, and just have some sort of good rapport with. How important is it in your journey? And this is probably more applicable to just any profession, but in specifics with writing, especially because you don't want your voice to be tainted when it goes through the editing process and it may not even sound like you. But how important is it, in your opinion, to trust the relationship or to have a great relationship with your agent or your editor and to trust that agent or that editor?
Yeah, I mean, to me, well, first of all, I need to trust them, and I also need to enjoy myself. Like life is too short. I don't want to, be in a kind of anxiety head trip because they've, I trust Andy because one of the things that I've said about him already is he got right back to me always. Like I send him something, he reads it, he gets back to me.
Hmm.
That's like so great because you're not waiting for months and months. The same thing I've been really fortunate to have a great editor in the last two books, the same editor. It's rare these days that you have the same editor. I know
Hmm.
people have gone through, to have an editor that acquires their book, and then by the time it gets published, it's three editors later. It's really, and it's almost like an orphan. Like that last editor doesn't really care about the book, and so the book sort of falls into a pond and drops to the bottom like a pebble. Like, so I've been really lucky, and I've had this great editor named Elizabeth Disregard at St. Martin's Press. She's been great, and the first book she was that I did with her, she was my editor during COVID, which was like great for writers because she and I just had so much time to go through it really, really carefully, and I learned in that process with her. I had to fight for some things. There were some things I was like, no, but most of the time she would say something, I would push back, then I would sleep on it, then I'd get back to him like, okay, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have those outside eyes. If it's somebody who has good judgment, it's helpful. As a writer, you can't see it all the time.
No, I'm with you on that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, I've been drinking as well. It's just
Plus, you're
something's going around too.
tough.
Yeah, I just recovered from an illness
Oh no.
just a few days ago. Man, somehow, somewhere we contracted the coronavirus. When you mentioned the COVID, I'm like, we hit us again.
Oh
Hit me for the
no.
third time. Yep, third time since 2020, and so I don't even know how I got it.
Oh man. Harsh.
Don't have a clue. But okay. Um, so my follow up to that is, when it comes to your voice and making sure that your voice, as I mentioned, isn't tainted, being able to trust the process, trust the editor, it goes a long way. But when that process is over, what does it look like for you and your experience from now that it is fully edited? What's the remaining of the what is the remainder remainder what is the remaining of the what is the remainder of the process? There it is.
In fact, it's a long period between when you finish writing the book and you sort of turned in your final edit to when it published. Like 9 months, actually, or a year. So during that time, I get like it gets copy edited. That's actually pretty brutal, the copy edits, because they
Hmm.
check on nonfiction. It's different, of course, with fiction. On nonfiction, they check every single fact and they write you like, "Are you sure? Can you verify that?" Like it's super. Suddenly, you're like, "I know nothing." Did I make this up? I can't remember where I found it. So that the copy editing is really rigorous. That's great because then the book is not going to have fake mistakes in it. That's a
Hmm.
nice thing, but at the same time, that's a pretty intense period. And then there's the galley proofs, and it's amazing how many times you read it, you'll always find a mistake. It's like
Hmm.
unbelievable. And then there's all the like the acknowledgments and the covers, and there's really a whole long thing. So I have a book coming out in August, and and it's called it's Milena and Margaret, a love story in Ravensbrook. And that book, I finally have the final galley proof. Like I finally got the absolute last version about a week ago, and it will come out in August. So that's I don't know, a couple more months from now.
Okay.
4 months from now. And in that time, that now I'm having a meeting with them about promotional stuff. But they didn't
Hmm.
really do this with the first book because I didn't expect it to do well, but they're hoping that this one does well. So they're putting a little bit more juice in the promotion,
Hmm.
which is so interesting. Like the amount that they pay you in advance is about the amount that they're going to actually work on making the book work.
Yeah.
So direct, there's no mystery at all. So the first book I got a very small advance, and they didn't really do a whole lot. And this one, they're doing a lot more
Hmm.
um, because Andy got me a better advance.
Oh
So,
yeah.
they, there's a whole promotion plan that we're going over, and I don't know quite what that's going to look like. I'll find out. But the last book, I had to do you still as an author have to do a lot of the promotion. I mean, even
Hmm.
though it's not self-published, you really do spend about a year just talking, at least if you're lucky, talking about the book. And it's really hard to get started on something new. Then I'm trying really hard to get down to a new book, but I'm a little bit betwixt and between.
You know, that is, I'm glad you mentioned that. Because it's just one thing for people. See, I've never been trad published, right? So I wouldn't necessarily know it from experience, but I've met not just with yourself, but I've met other trad published authors who, and in my research as well, learning that even though you would ideally expect that, the traditionally published route would mean, boom, automatic. My book is going to go all the way up here and I don't have to do anything. But I'm glad you mentioned the fact that you still have to, there's still some, and lack for a better term, you're still responsible in a huge way of marketing the book. Is that safe to
Yeah,
assume from
in
what you
fact,
said?
you have to have a really good website. You got to be on all the social media stuff. You have to have the Instagram, and then I would get contacted directly by people who would want like book clubs and that kind of thing. It wasn't coming through the publisher for the last book. It was really coming directly to me.
Hmm.
And it's a little bit of a word of mouth book, so it's slowly building. And I get a book club or a synagogue, or I've had a few conferences, but I would say that pretty much almost all of the engagements I set up. You know, I I could have even done more if I have a full time job, so I didn't have the time. But, if I was, I would have done a much more kind of aggressive, ambitious promotional plan myself. And
Hmm.
I do know writers who hire like a publicist. I looked into that. Like I actually got approached by a publicist, but the price of that was almost as much as I made in advance. And I don't know. And Andy said, it's not going to translate into that many more sales. Like it doesn't work that way. So
Yeah. And it's interesting too when you consider just timing as well, like with timing when it comes to promotions and what the book is about and who does it apply to and how do you even get out there, and then social media, and each
yeah,
social media platform has a different marketing tactic that you
and it's
have
again,
to like.
yeah. I'm a
It's
grandma too. do with Instagram. I might have my kids try to show me how to do it all and like the tricks and stuff. Yeah, I'm not at all a pro, and there's so much more I could do if I had the time. And
Yeah, you know,
I just want to write, right? That's kind of my free time. That's what I
mhm.
want to do. So it's a bit of a struggle, but
Oh, for sure.
but it's
Like
also
it,
cool to talk to book clubs. It's fun.
oh
So
yes. Yeah. So like in your time, right? Like you've been doing this for a long time, and you have seen it shift. You've seen the business go to where self-publishing opportunities wasn't even possible, to where going good being querying and getting a book agent and going that route versus now people can kind of just build their own audience and
yeah,
find success that way. But how have you seen how much has the business changed in, let's say, like the last 15 years?
a lot. No, it's really changed a lot, and it's really kind of the literature world anyway, like the sort of traditional publishing has really had taken a hit, like seriously. Like a lot of the old, really famous editors have either had taken a package anyway. They've been bought out or sold or retired, and so you have really a lot of young new editors who basically have a much more commercial mandate. Like they have to get big sellers. They have to get these like big name, someone with a TV platform or whatever. So it's very, very hard. And I think Andy would back me up on this to sell a novel, for example. Like nobody's buying a novel. Obviously novels are published, but there's like such a small handful of them, and there's so many great writers out there who've written beautiful
Hmm.
books. I think it's like the publishing and also the publishing margins have gotten smaller for publishers. There's only a few publishing firms actually because they all are owned. All these little imprints are owned by the few big conglomerates. I mean, I think there's
Hmm.
4 or 5. There's hardly any independent publishers left. Um, I was, and all these small imprints that used to exist within these publishers have also
Hmm.
kind of folded. Um, so yeah, it's harder and harder, and what the publishing world wants is a sure thing. They don't really want to take, and they don't want to build a career. So it doesn't matter how good. Like, let's say you had a bestseller 2 books ago, but then your second book wasn't great. That's what matters. It's not only you're only as good as your last book. So it's
Hmm.
pretty harsh out there. I mean, books still get published, but it's weird because sometimes I read a book and I'm like, how did this get published? Because it's really terrible.
Yeah.
There's so many good books I've read that aren't getting published. So I don't know what's out there.
Yeah, and it's hard too because it's like it's so skewed in what you feel like can work and what doesn't, and you might have been writing, well, not you, but just like in general, right? The writer themselves may have been writing for, let's say, 20 years, 30, 40 years, and they have all of this experience. But now, if you're an influencer with a significant following, right? By significant, I mean, let's say like in the hundreds of thousands of followers, and of course that can translate into money. And I think many people, especially newer writers who come into the business, at least into the book publishing world, writing books, want to do that route, may find difficulty in understanding why is my book, like, why can't I get a deal? But this person who has never written a book can just shoot that way. And at the end of the day, it does come down to it being a business,
Yeah,
right? Now,
especially the ghostwriter too. Those influencers, by the way, they're not writing the book.
yeah, no, exactly. And speaking of of the writers, I want to ask another question, right? Because um, with not just with editing, but just in general, with this surge of of the AI
Mm.
and the softwares out there that can work as an editor, how can you trust that your, well, not your editor, because I'm sure you have a relationship with your editor, you actually know the person, right? But how can somebody trust that their editor is actually them as the editor and it's not like an AI program, AI software that they're using?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. That's a great question because it's a wild world out there, and this is all like I feel very old. I've been in this game since well, I guess like 40 years.
Okay.
I'm 60s. I probably started in my 20s. And so I'm a little bit old school, and I completely the whole. But I barely use AI myself ever, like even for work stuff. And people are always like, "Why don't you use AI?" I'm like, I don't know. It just seems weird to me. I'm not the person that can answer that question. but to go back to the other, just a little bit, because I had a little bit of a crisis in my 40s, um, where nothing was working, and I've been working so hard, and I thought I'd written like my best book ever, and I couldn't sell it, and couldn't get the agent I had there to call me back and everything. And I basically made a decision to write what I loved and to enjoy myself while I'm writing and to enjoy the process of writing, and that was the reason to write, and that really worked. So I think at the end of the day, you just have to write what you love and you have to enjoy the process of writing.
So aside from the whole AI world and how that goes, obviously, you were in this since you've been in the business for, for 40 years plus. AI may have always been there, but it wasn't necessarily something that was like celebrated or glamorized or things that people use, and at least in an abundance as is used now. So as far as you writing books, right, and what you write and what you work on and where you draw your inspiration from, because you've written like short essays and anthologies and just your nonfiction work in particular with the nine, right? Where not just from I remember reading you got some of your inspiration from your grandmother, right? But where do you generally draw inspiration from to be able to write so deep and so rich and so graphic as well?
Yeah, I mean, I love research. I've discovered I love research with the nine, and I love stories. So, I mean, I think that essentially, as human beings and as our time on the earth, we tell stories. That's kind of how we relate to each other. Even like a couple of friends get together, and we're just like, and gossiping. But gossiping is can be this rich vein of storytelling, and I've always drawn to people who tell good stories. And I think someone will tell a story, or he'll hear a little teeny glimmer of something, and I think that's kind of interesting. Like where and then I just start to research and start to. Nowadays, you have the internet that
Mm.
When I started out, it was more like I had all kinds of weird esoteric books and encyclopedias, and I'd go to libraries and I just try to find, you know, what's there. I just like
Mhm.
I wanted more. I just want more. I want. I'm curious. I guess that's it. It's just like I,
Yeah.
I let my curiosity take over and go as deeply as I can, and then try to imagine what that must have been like. Talk to as many people as I can. Get people to react to the story, and what do they think about it? Like, what would be their question that they would ask? So just to,
Mhm.
I mean, I think essentially that's really one of the interesting activities as a human being. And we're all trying to figure out what the meaning is of our lives, and through our
Yes.
stories, we do that. I think.
Okay, okay. Now, what to kind of like build off of that, 'cause I love research as well. I'm not a nonfiction writer, and oh my goodness, I don't know if I could like survive in that world. I'd get gobbled up. But I think like every writer has something unique to offer into the literary world, and I also do poetry, and so like as a poet, right? As a poet, you know, you're so vulnerable, and what you write about, depending on what you write about, but like, for yourself, how different is your approach to writing when it comes to writing your nonfiction work in comparison to poetry, which I guess to an extent could be nonfiction, but it can also be fiction. I don't know. There's a blend between both, but
Yeah. Okay. So I would say almost there is. That's a really interesting question because honestly, each one of my books, the seed of the book was a poem that I wrote.
mm,
And then later, I was like, wait, what was I getting at? And then there's actually nonfiction story, or there's a deeper story that poem kind of outlined in a kind of almost unconscious way. And I also think that working as a poet, as you do, it's like a real close attention to language, and that's
mhm,
enjoyment of the word at the level of the word or the sentence or the phrase or this. And I think that's like a great a skill or a great like practice. It helps you.
mhm,
It helps build your chops in a way to work in the level of the poem. So that when you go to writing nonfiction, or even when you go to writing fiction or an essay or something, or memoir, you have a little bit more. It's like you're a bodybuilder or something. You have more
mhm,
muscle. more, you understand language in a better way, and it's very minute, but like, little by little, the more you work in poetry, I think the better your general language is.
Hmm.
Kind of love of the word. So they actually overlap more than I thought at first, poetry and like my last book, The Nine, really started as a poem that I wrote about my tante Hélène. I mean, it
Oh,
started
wow.
with the story that she told me and everything and all that, but
Right.
I wrote a poem about it when I first fell in love with that story.
Hmm.
10 years or 20 years before I actually wrote, or 10 or something years before I actually started writing the book. There was a
Hmm.
poem that I wrote. And the same thing with this next book. There was a poem that I wrote that, it's not really in the book at all, that poem, but that poem showed me that, oh, that's something that really interests you. Yeah.
No, for sure. It's interesting how like ideas blossom
Yeah.
from something that was never intended to be what it turned out to
I know.
become.
And I had no idea when I wrote that poem that this was going to be like a book, which is like many years of work, you know,
Yeah.
you know,
So
the
oh, I'm
unconscious.
sorry, sorry.
No, no, just saying the unconscious kind of is working things out without you even knowing it.
Right. And and I think that's what one of the very many things that I love about just a writer, and just me respecting other writers when it comes to just their ideas. You can use the world as your library, really. The more experience you have, the more you're willing to, even as much as you getting up and going outside and walking, whatever happens in that moment can then become an idea for a story that you never knew was going to become an idea until you went on that walk.
Absolutely. It's a way of being alive in the world.
For sure. Now, one of the other things that you mentioned earlier that I really really love that you said was to enjoy it. Some people get into this process of my last book was so successful. I need to write a sequel. Ah, but how can I top what I just wrote? Or
Hmm.
people really love what I'm writing. Maybe I should continue to write in this genre when in actuality, maybe I just wrote in that one genre because I was just drawn to an idea, but I don't really want to write in that genre. And so it can become stressful, it can become mundane, and in many ways, writers can stagnate because they don't feel like there's growth. But because there's a demand for it, they do it. For you, it sounds like that you may have at one point in time been in that headspace of whatever it was. Maybe your books were successful, you wanted to do it, or you thought that the book was really good, which I'm sure it was, but it just the agents were like, "Nah, I'm not feeling it," but gave you the impression that they were feeling it, and then it just became, "I'm not enjoying this process as much. Let me do what I love." Is that what your experience was like?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably when I was younger much more caught up in I have to be successful, and I had friends that were successful, so jealousy as well, and you just like you kind of hate yourself because you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, I struggled, and you know, there was also the constraints of life. I had children, I had a full time job, so you're just like trying to write and trying to and I realized that my focus was always about getting published, like getting the deal, getting the book published. I don't even know if it was about getting success, but for me at that point, it was like just
Hmm.
get published. And I was able to get poetry published. I was able to get children's books published. I was able to ghostwrite other books, but not my own book. And that was really. I just beat myself up about it. I mean, I remember thinking like, oh, I'll never. And then I thought, like, what is it really? Like, what is it really you're doing?
Hmm.
Is the point to be published, or is the point to write because you love to write? You're going to write
Hmm.
anyway. Um, maybe maybe just shift your brain a little bit and just not make it be write whatever you want. Like just write whatever you want and write what the book you need to write right then. And I wrote a really funny book then because I felt like I need to laugh. I didn't get it published, but that's how I got Andy. It's a very
Hmm.
it's a funny book. I'm sort of glad it didn't get published because I see how flawed it is now. But
No.
but but at the time, as I was writing it, I was having a good time. I was like enjoying the experience every day of my because I only could do a few hours in the morning before going to work. I was enjoying those few hours,
Yeah.
and who knows? Maybe I'll go back to that and fix it and do something, or maybe not, or maybe that was just training, or but that's to me, just be true to yourself. Like um,
Hmm.
I really believe that. I also know that it's sometimes really heartbreaking because you put your heart and soul into something, and
Hmm.
it doesn't come to fruition. And I know so many stories of also people who didn't have any recognition during their lifetime, and then did, one of them being Kafka, who had practically no recognition during his lifetime. I know this is
Hmm.
part of my new book. And now look at him. I mean, everybody knows the word Kafkaesque. I mean, he's a literary term. He had
Hmm.
no idea. He died before any of that ever happened.
Yeah.
So so if you think about all those things, you're just like, ugh, it's just don't even, you know. I mean, there's so many examples of these great books that we consider great books that everyone that got panned by the critics, that nobody considered were important.
Hmm.
And the writer dies, and then now like everyone in high school has to read that book. You know what I mean? Like Moby Dick.
Right.
I mean, there's so many. you know. So I yeah, I just think we can't get ourselves in that ego trip about, in that headspace about like external praise. It's always
Yeah.
nice. I'm not turning it away,
Yeah.
but really you need to have your internal reason to do things. It has to come from within.
Yeah. I was listening to you, and I was just having a flashback of, like, I remember like a couple of my first books, and I'm sure every writer who publishes their work um, goes through this process of, I just want somebody to read it. I
Yeah,
just want
absolutely.
somebody to, like, see what I have to say, because I truly believe this will help. And I'm sure every writer, it's kind of like looking at your baby. It's like, my baby's beautiful. My baby's a genius. My baby's smart. Even if it has like an eye hanging out and like his cheeks are deformed, there's still like a beauty to
Yeah,
it. So everyone wants it to be, that external, like, gratifying feeling
yeah,
that really is going to be an endless search, I feel, until you can pull it out of yourself
right.
and find the joy within yourself, and then others will naturally gravitate
We'll respond to
towards it.
that. Absolutely.
Right.
There's always going to be better writers than you and writers
Hmm.
less successful than you. Like I've noticed it because I run this artist residency program with the Dormar House, and so we have some pretty famous writers who are still like sometimes like, yeah, but so and so has four more books, or so and so has, I don't know, the
Yeah.
Booker, whatever. I'm like, yeah, it's like, we can always like you might be a top model, and there'll be a model that's more beautiful than you. Like there's that game has no end. Like you never reach the
Hmm.
top, because then maybe you reach the top and you think, oh my gosh, I didn't live a good life. My wife left me or whatever. You know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
there's uh, so that that's why it's also kind of an empty pursuit, like to try to
Hmm.
for external, for the external. There's a great poem by W.S. Merwin called Barrymore about
Hmm.
that, where he says that because Barrymore was his teacher of poetry, and Merwin asked him like, "How will I ever know if anything I've ever done is any good?" And Barryman said to him, "You will die not knowing. You can't know.
Yeah.
Paper
That's
your wall."
heavy.
He says, "Paper your wall with rejection slips. Get down on your knees and pray to the muse, because you will die without ever knowing."
Mm. You
So,
know, and time is so short.
yeah,
And so many people, I've been guilty of this as well, of just burying your head into your work, and completely not even noticing what's going on right in front of you. I have children, right? I'm married, have children, and family time to me is important. That's why I'm really grateful that what we're doing, I can do it from my home. Just
yeah,
set up a recording session in an area where the noise is condensed to where there won't be much distractions. But family time is so important, and it's so imperative, I believe, and just the success to the person, because writing is lonely. It's so lonely. And what I mean by that, for those who are like, what are you talking about? How can you be lonely when you have people around you? It's just you're submerged into your own work, and what you have is the world that you created that might not make you feel so lonely, but the writing process itself is just you and that paper, and whether you're typing it or writing it, it's just you and that, and that's what has your attention. And I can imagine for you, because you've done it for 40 years, you probably can have many more thoughts to what I'm saying. But is there any truth to that for you?
I mean, it's finding the right balance. Like it's completely like I had to at one point I had to build a little writing shed in my garden, well, in my garage because I couldn't. I had the kids and their friends, and I had also had my mom living with me, and I had another friend of mine who'd had a stroke living with me. So I had a house full of people I was taking care of, plus my job. And I remember getting up one morning and there were people sleeping in every room, crashing on the couch, and there was nowhere for me to write, and I was so angry. And
Hmm.
so I made a little a little space in the garage. I built a wall, and I made this the size of a large closet. But that's where I wrote my last book. It was like heaven. So on the one hand, you need that little space where you
Hmm.
can go. You need the place where you can go and do your work. And even if it's for just a few hours a day, consistently, you just go there and you sit in that space and you do the work. And even 1 hour a day after a year, you've written some pages. The
Hmm.
other side of that, I would agree with you completely, is that life is short. And I was listening to another podcast where the guy was interviewing a death doula, a woman who helps people die. And he asked her, is there anything that everyone who's dying says? And she said, oh yeah, I can tell you right away what it is. Everyone that they regret, and the one thing that everybody always regrets, always, is that they worked too hard. They didn't spend enough time with their friends and family.
Mm.
And it's so I'm like I remember that too. Like okay, it's a consistent regret. Like people she's seen die from all different things have all said that. So we're all
That
gonna die.
is deep. Yeah, no, true. Yeah, we sure will.
What's the regret? Like, what would be the regret? And one, I would regret having not written my books, but I would also regret not having had spent that, not been with my friends and family when it was when I could be with my friends and family. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so important. Even like just hearing you say that, it sometimes you know the answer, sometimes you know it yourself, but when you hear it
yeah,
said directly to you, it speaks to you in ways it could. Then you go back and reflect on how much time
hmm
did I spend away. So right now, right, I'm currently in the military, and the military has their demand on how much time they demand of you. As I can imagine, working just a normal job or a job in general, and that detracts from potential family time. But then that what you make from financially helps
yeah,
you with your family time. So it's like give and take.
yeah,
But
that balance, yeah.
yeah, but finding a balance is so important. Now, I'll ask you just a couple more questions before I know you have another meeting you got to attend.
So you're in the military, like, so do you have time when you have to be away working with the military, and then you have time off, or how does that work? Like chunks of time?
Oh yes. So like yes. So I'm in the U.S. Air Force, right? And we generally work like it's weird because it's like a 9 to 5, but it's generally from 7:30 to 4:30. But we also in it have to do like military based training. So I work in the finance world right now. I spent the last 9.5 years working in mental health within the military, but there's always continuous trainings that you need to do because they want you to stay ready in the event that you get deployed and you go down and you go into whatever the war is, whether you're actually out there physically fighting, which is not generally something.
Right.
Right, which is not really something the Air Force really focuses on heavily. But or when you have to go, they call it going downrange, and you need to just be proficient in your job to be able to still help supply whatever the mission is for the president of the United States, whoever that will be or whoever that is currently. So for me, we go there, just do our normal job, do work the finance. I work my finance stuff and take care of my troops, take care of them, get back home, and then be with my family. But I try to find a balance. Like right now, I knew I can do this meeting with you because I wake up early. Many times I've waken up around I used to wake up on average like between 3 to 3:30. That's normally reserved for when I'm writing because I need as much time. But on average I'm waking up between like 5 o'clock to like 5:30. On a good day I'd wake up around like 4:30. Unless I'm working on a book. Then my schedule's stringent. I make sure I go to sleep earlier so I can wake up around 3.
Well,
Um
good for you. That's great.
Oh yes, and it's amazing because like ideally you would think it could be exhausting, but just that dopamine you receive from just that writing and you just diving into it and having a good time. But where I lose a lot of my energy sometimes is everything else, where I have to. like we had mentioned social media earlier, and me trying to like just market on social media and just learning the algorithms to each of the platforms like
Uh,
TikTok and Instagram and X and LinkedIn, and it's just a beast with each of them because they all require a different approach for
and
the same project.
consumes so much of your time. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
I totally feel for you. That is, it's, I completely agree. You know, and it's hard because okay, you got your job, you have your family, you're trying to do your writing, you're trying to promote this within podcast. You know, it's a lot. It's a lot of things.
Yes, but I think what's helped me out, especially with the podcast, with this one in particular, is that I've gone through trial and error and experimented with different podcasts and what I want to say. Do I want it to be self help? Do I want to talk about books? Do I want to talk about entertainment? I went through just a plethora. I think I've been doing podcasts for like 3 years, but
Oh,
this one, the reason how I knew this one was going to work was because I knew I was specific in what I wanted to do and who I wanted to help. And as soon as I knew that, the other ones I didn't know. I was just kind of figuring out, but I know what the purpose of this one is. And so I'm able to get people who are willing to just help spread a message. I always tell people, I was like, I don't want anyone's money. I just want time. I just hope that they're willing, like yourself, Gwen, coming on just to share some knowledge, talk about what they're working on. Cause it's really supposed to help not only educate people through people like yourself, ma'am, with experience of what you've garnered through your experience and as a writer, but to inspire people too. Just in hearing your stories, I'm sitting here. This is wow. This is it's such a good feeling. But to kind of get back to that question about the military, that's kind of what it's like. It's more like a demanding 9 to 5 job.
right. Okay, got you. Okay.
Yes, but okay. So I guess my last question is before I let you go is what advice do you have for the younger generation of writers and creators coming up?
You know, really, I think to become a good writer, to become a good poet, to get better and better, you have to read. And so I just read as much as you possibly can, read voraciously, read across genres. Don't just read one kind of thing. Read everything. Read fantasy, read thrillers, read nonfiction, read novels, read like just. And when you find one writer that you like, read everything they've written. Be a completist, like because that you learn a lot about writing when you see all the books and you see, oh, there were some that were really bad, but you also you start to learn that writer's tricks and that writer's, and you can start to see structure that way. And I just think that the best way to learn is by looking what other people have done, and also it's enjoyable.
Hmm.
I think the same thing with poetry. Like you have to just really read poets to to and see the beauty in their words. And
Hmm.
so that to me is the best advice. I think, obviously I think you should do it every day as much as possible, as much as humanly as possible, and you should, write what you love. And I don't necessarily think you should need to write what you know, but you write what you're curious about, and then find
Hmm.
out what you can about it. Read every book on that subject that you can find, or audiobooks if that you prefer that, they're great. Or but I think the world of language of writing is really even though there's AI and everything, AI is based on writing. Other people find that you get down to it. There's human beings that have actually written those words, so
Hmm.
that's not going to go away. So we have to still write the words ourselves.
Okay. No, thank you so much for that. And
Thank you.
as you
And
were mentioning that,
sorry that it did so rushed, but thank you. It's lovely talking with you.
oh, of course, of course. Okay, so I know that was my last question, but I meant to ask you this in terms of like just a balance, right? Just really quick, how does a person who has so much going on, like what advice do you have for them in particular, for finding a balance to still be able to write? Because some people get into it and they completely step away and they wish that they didn't.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think, and this is true for me, even after all these years. If I'm doing it every day, it's easier. But the
Okay.
first, like, I haven't written in a while because I've been working on this book that's coming out. And I know that when I get down to the next project and I start writing, it's going to be like, ugh, like mud at first. The first day, the second day, the third day. And it's just a little bit of self discipline. Like, okay, I'm just sticking with this. I'm just
Okay.
going to write another few. And you can write badly, just like write bad where it's fine. Like, don't be a perfectionist. Because as soon as you start to get that motor going, I think like in a week or two, then you're off to the races. And there'll be slumps in the middle and you just got to power through them. Like, And I think sometimes when I get to a slump, what helps is to read a good book or
Okay.
two. It's a kind of like a little bit of a cure.
Okay, I like that. When you get into a slump, just just read and
Yeah.
write, do it daily. Okay, that's perfect advice. Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Gwen,
I wish you the best of luck with your writing. I wanted to know more about it. Maybe I can find out more from Andy or finish it later.
oh, oh, I can definitely tell you. I can tell you, offline. Once the recording is over and you don't have a meeting, I'll probably send you an email or probably talk to you again. This has been fun.
Yeah.
It's been great and it's been fun. And I know you have to get going, so I'll go ahead and cut it short.
It's a work job, Paul. Yeah.
For sure. Yep. Well, hey, thank you all so much for taking a brief moment out of your day to tune into today's episode. Gwen, thank you so much for coming on board. I'm looking forward to being able to read your new project that's going to launch sometime in August. You're more than welcome to come back on if you would like, and we can promote that as well and talk about that. Otherwise, you all take care. Enjoy the remainder of your day, and I'll catch you next time.